subscriptions at Sikkim365.com.
All right, Joseph Duarte. We had Joseph on recently. Covers the University of Houston for the Chronicle, Houston Chronicle. And I mean, in a matter of just, it seems like hours, it's been a few days, not many, just a handful. Things have changed dramatically. Joseph Duarte, he was on the Zoom call. I was watching it. I guess I was on it. I just didn't participate. University of Houston with so many members. Joseph, what does this mean to the University of Houston today?
Well, I mean, it's historic. It's monumental. It's the culmination of decades of trying to get back to major college athletics. And, you guys know the history. You know the breakup of the Southwest Conference, how the Big 12 was formed, and those that were left out. And it's been 27 years of wandering the wilderness for the University of Houston, and they finally got today what they have wanted all this time, to be relevant again and to now have a seat at the table of one of the five power conferences in athletics.
Joseph, for those who may not be able to put a number on it or quantify, how much has not being in a power conference cost them in their efforts to grow?
Well, they've still tried to grow. They've just leveraged themselves to the point where, it's like, you go, how much you have in your bank account, but you sort of go and buy something anyway, and you're going to have to get those overdraft fees and all that later on down the road. But, this, when you're not getting the $40 million payouts every year, it cripples you on what you can do. And they were getting $7 million in the American. And think about it, when they were in Conference USA, they were probably getting half of that. So when you think of all the money that was left by not being a part of that initial Big 12 group, it could have had devastating implications. But they had a spurt of about 6 or 7 years earlier this decade where they went out. They spent about close to $300 million to get things back in order, so that if a day like today came finally, they would be ready. But they certainly, there were lots of talks of where this program could be going if a day like they didn't come soon. And luckily for them, they finally got that invitation.
Joseph, what do you think of the members that will be coming along outside of Houston in BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati?
It's an interesting mix. None of the four are ever going to measure up to what Texas and Oklahoma brought to the league in terms of revenue and just the exposure. But having, been around the four programs in recent years, Cincinnati is in a really good recruiting market in Ohio. They're top 10 right now. Their basketball program has a lot of history. Football is doing well. You look at Central Florida, they're in another really good television market. They had a couple of unbeaten seasons in New Year's Six bowls, fairly recent. And then you look at BYU at the name brand and the fan base that they have. Their stadium, I believe it's close to 60,000 or above. So they're going to bring an immediate boost in terms of exposure from a national level. And then Houston, the results haven't been there for football in recent years, but they've shown the ability to have good years like they did under Tom Herman. The basketball team went to the Final Four. So each of them brings a little something. And I think at the end of the day, if you're the Big 12, knowing what the other option was, you take these four teams from the group of five who are probably the best options out of the group of five, and it allows you to stay in business and survive.
Is there any doubt that men's basketball, with where Kelvin Sampson is, the Final Four, and I know that he managed, I was at the game, they got hammered by Baylor, but almost everybody did. Is he in better position than anybody else at this particular time to have immediate success?
Well, yeah, and Kelvin Sampson knows the blueprint. He was at Oklahoma for, I believe, a dozen or so years, and he's familiar with the league. He's kept Texas Tech, Oklahoma State on the schedule. And, he was admitted today. He said, look, we know that this was a football-driven decision, but what it does for basketball, he said, look, the American is a good basketball program, a good basketball conference. But when you go into the Big 12 and you're Houston and you're getting annual visits by Baylor and Kansas and Texas Tech, what that does from an exposure, from a TV standpoint, from sellout crowds, he knows that. And on top of that, you'll get 6 or 8 teams in the NCAA tournament. The Americans struggle to get 2 at times. So this is a big win for the men's basketball side, and Kelvin Sampson really couldn't ask for more of what he's got right now going on with that program.
It has been at times, TCU felt this way, bitter. Obviously, SMU, Rice has been a part of this. Houston has been this way. How much, Joseph, do you think, if anything at all, that Mack Rhoades, knowing where everything is at Houston, what the good and the bad might be, and also staying in touch with them, how much do you think he might have helped?
That's a good question. Mack was there when things really started to take off. He was part of the Sampson hire and the Herman hire, and really laying out the blueprint of what they wanted to do to build these facilities and upgrade things. And if you're Houston, you needed to have a guy maybe that's in your corner, an ally that, if it came down to it, was going to support you and back you up. And I think, deep down inside, Mack Rhoades felt like Houston was a deserving team, the school to add to the Big 12. And, you talk about 2016 or in the past where a lot of this has been drawn out over Texas's objection to having Houston in the same league with them. I think this was completely different because you had the 3 other Texas schools that didn't necessarily see Houston as a threat, but as a chance to, add another Texas school to the mix. And, if it comes down to it, your recruiting's recruiting. Everybody's going to get their guys at some point. But I think having Mack and knowing the landscape of Houston, he was able to toss his support in a lot more than someone who hadn't been there before.
I do know this, and I think it's fair to bring it up because at times Houston, there's been people who have made comments about academics, and there's people that make comments that are even the higher level of snootiness, the AAU, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's great if you have an institution that's in that level or whatever they call it with the Pac-12 as well. But I thought it was cool that the chancellor said it and admitted it. Hey, we had to get better academically, and it appears as if they put a lot of emphasis on it and they turned that corner. How much do you think that helped?
Oh, absolutely. This is a school that, has been called Cougar High. They've been referred to as a commuter school. And, Renu Couture has been, I think at the school now, it's probably close to 13 or 14 years. And she sort of understood where they needed to catch up and get to on the academic level. They're tier 1. They're opening up a medical school. They have the law school. There's so many things that have gone in the right direction. And then, she admitted, look, I maybe not be as savvy when it comes to the athletic portion, but I want to, or I envision being a powerhouse in that as well. So she's come in, she's their rock star. She's the one who has gotten them in position and really opened, the books for them to be able to do a lot of things athletically that had just been completely neglected for decades.
Hey, Joseph, thank you very much. I know that you've been a part of this and all over it. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing that rivalry. I think they've played 28 times, Baylor and Houston, 14-13-1. I believe Baylor has the edge in the old days of the Southwest Conference when Houston came in a little bit later on. Thanks for your time and enjoy.
No, thank you for having me on.
Houston Chronicle sports writer Joseph Duarte on the Cougars, and joining the Big 12 as early as the earliest would be July 2023. Right now, planned on the 24 season because of just the timeline of their exit and all that. Of course, will be negotiated. This is from the 806, and I know we got a break, Paul, for the